everyone. You can tell by the jumper I'm wearing that I'm recording this at the end of what's been a really tough term. I don't know if the Christmas jumper will mean you take me any more or less seriously than normal, but in all seriousness, the first thing I've got to say before talking about QA is just a massive thank you for everything you've all done for the trainees on our different skit routes this term. I think our trainees have had just such a fantastic deal compared with other providers, and that is entirely down to the hard work and the efforts you've all gone to this term. So thank you very much, and it obviously goes without saying that I hope you've had a great Christmas break too. So quality assurance. Thank you to those of you, in fact all of you, who either turned up for the review meetings or sent in some feedback to us. Really useful getting everyone's thoughts on our new approach to quality assurance. Really good feedback, and I just want to go through some of the main themes that came up and some of the adaptations we're going to make to the quality assurance system for the upcoming term. So general feedback was that the online form works. People seem to be happy using it. It seems to be a sensible way of collating information and reporting it in an efficient way. Also came through, people like the new emphasis on intent, implementation and impact. And that we're a much more mature organisation than we were a few years ago. So we've moved beyond just checking whether X, Y and Z happens. We're much more about, is what we're doing as good as it could possibly be? We talked a lot about, and I'll say a bit more about this later, but we talked a lot about doing less quality assurance, i.e. quality assuring fewer mentors and trainees, but doing it more thoroughly. And we also talked about trying to bring in a bit of a greater emphasis on trainee voice. So I'll talk to you about how we're going to do that also. Completely fair comments from people about the clarity of some of the questions. So we've tightened up that on the online form, and I'll show you the changes in a moment. One thing that came through in conversation was that the quality assurance comments we were getting in tended to be focusing on the mentoring, and that's completely understandable because you were essentially watching what the mentor was doing with the trainee. But what we actually want to be aiming at is looking at the aggregation of all aspects of our curriculum when we do the quality assurance, because the mentor is probably the most important component of that, but everything else we do has a bearing on how our trainees turn out. So we want to find some kind of way of aggregating the impact of the entire curriculum, even though you're really looking at going to see what the mentor is doing. And some comments asking if we could tweak the forms just to avoid duplication of responses, people feeling they've got to write the same thing in more than one box. So just a quick reminder that the main part of the quality assurance form is about evaluating how the extent to which we're living up to the Sheffield Skit intent. So we've got a bunch of intent statements, and we're asking how well are we implementing our curriculum to achieve our intent, and then we're also asking, what's the impact on trainees at the end of the day, because that's what it's about. The terms that's just gone, we looked at the intent statements around challenge and enjoyment, and the term that is coming up, the focus is going to be on sequential learning, and there's 3 intent statements in that area. First change to the form, a very small one. We're including 2 extra questions, just the name of the school and the name of the mentor. And I want to talk a bit later about thinking about maybe not doing quality assurance visits to absolutely every trainee every term. Then you'll see why it's important for us to be collecting this information when we do a quality assurance visit. The main section of the form, we've made a couple of changes. So this is evaluating how effectively we're implementing our curriculum and the impact on trainees. So the first 2 questions in each section were what's going well and the even better if in terms of how we're delivering our curriculum. So we've made sure we've got the word implementation there, just to be clear about that. These 2 questions are about what we are actually doing, and that the 3rd question in each block is about, well, what's the impact on the trainee? So you can see here that the comments that you're asked for here it's thinking about what you see in the trainee. So a specific comment in relation to the trainee that would justify the level of impact that you think our curriculum is having in this area. So just responding to feedback then, we've included a set of prompt questions for each of the intent areas. Now, just want to be clear, this is not, we're not asking you to reel off these questions one by one in your meeting with the mentor and the trainee, but to give you an idea of the sorts of questions, the sorts of lines of inquiry we think you should be making in order to evaluate how effectively we're implementing this intent statement or this aspect of our curriculum. And you can see here what we're trying to steer the quality assurance team towards is not just looking at the mentor, but trying to understand how well the other aspects of our curriculum are delivered. So, you know, how effectively are the host teachers, this is particularly secondary, supporting our curriculum delivery. Also, some of these questions will ask questions about hub and central training sessions, because they're an important part of our curriculum too. And you'll see within all the questions, typical week, in any given week. So we're trying also to ask you to pull out a kind of sense of what normally happens, not just what you see on the occasion that you go in to see a particular trainee and their mentor. And we hope as well, by providing these slightly more specific questions, we're a little bit clearer about the sorts of things you might comment on in the WWW and EBI boxes for this part of our curriculum intent, and that will help avoid duplication and you being perhaps a little bit uncertain about what should go in different boxes. The final bit of the form, which is really a checkbox, is the trainee getting what they're entitled to. I think our questioning wasn't quite clear before. There's a clearly yes, no for all of these questions. And when we reviewed the responses this time around, it was people were spending a lot of time sort of explaining why they'd put yes. If you're clicking a yes to the trainee entitlement questions, we don't need to know any more information. It's happening. We're only after a comment really if you've put no as a response to the question above, and hopefully this addition here in those questions will clarify that and save everyone some time. So they're the changes to the form. In terms of changes to the process, we had a lot of discussion about do we need to see every single trainee and the mentor every term, and we concluded that we didn't. And by not doing so, it will enable us to do a more in-depth job of quality assuring the trainees and the mentors that we do see. You'll have picked up from the previous slide that we're really interested in typicality. So to get an idea of typicality, your QA team are going to need to go into Basecamp and look at the mentor meeting notes from previous weeks to see what happens in a typical week. You might need to ask some more questions of the mentor and of the trainee in order to establish what happens in a typical week. In the secondary context, you might want to have a conversation with one of the host teachers, a brief conversation to establish how on message the host teachers are with what we're trying to achieve. All of that is going to take you longer, and we need to recognise that if quality assuring what's happening for one particular trainee takes longer, you're not going to be able to see as many trainees in any given time. That's fine. But what we would ask you to do if you are is to risk assess your trainees and your mentors, and to just think carefully about which trainees and mentors you will prioritise for visits. And to support your thinking there, just a reminder really that the purpose of the quality assurance is to first for you to understand and get an accurate picture of what is going on across your route, so that you can then drive improvement across your route. So the question you really need to ask yourself is, which trainees and mentors do you feel, based on the intelligence you've gathered so far, you need to go and see in order to do those things? Could you rationalise that to someone else, for example? You might decide, I've got 2 trainees in this school. I only need to see one of the trainees and do a really in-depth job of going to see what's happening with that trainee in order to get a good understanding of what's going on in the school in general. Now, if we're not seeing every trainee every term, then that does leave some things to chance. and we don't want any trainee to be falling through the cracks. So the other thing that we're going to introduce next term is a termly questionnaire for trainees. And the questions that we will ask each trainee will be the same prompt questions that appear on the implementation impact section of the quality assurance form. So we'll have an opportunity to ask those questions about typicality, about all the different aspects of our curriculum on the trainee. We'll be able to ask that of every single trainee every term, and we'll be able to look at that alongside the more in-depth look at what's going on that you'll be carrying out to get as accurate as possible a picture of what's going on and to drive improvement in the best way. The link to next term's QA form is there and waiting for you. So if you click on that link, that will take you through to the online form for the focus for next term, which is, or this term if you're looking at this in January, which is sequential learning. As always, I'm conscious there's some changes in this. I think we're likely to make it a discussion item at the next management board meeting, but you may well have questions that you want to ask in the interim. As always, please feel free to send those either my way to Jenna or to Tricia. If you're watching this in December, have a very happy Christmas. And a great new year, despite all restrictions. And if you're watching this in January, I hope you've had a really great break. Okay, thank you.